Hey everyone, my name is Ashley Henson and I'm the 50th Sheriff of Paulding County. You're about to listen to 10-8 Paulding, which is the official podcast of the Paulding County Sheriff's Office. So you may be wondering, what does 10-8 mean? Well, it's a 10 code, and it means that we're going in service. So every time our deputies go in service, they'll say 10-8 Paulding. So welcome to 10-8 Paulding, and we hope you enjoy our podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome to 10-8 Paulding, the Sheriff's Office podcast where we go into talking to the men and women behind the badges that we wear every day. Today we bring to you Major Donny Pace. It's over our Warrants and Civil Division, and we're going to talk to you about something very important that a lot of questions are asked about in the community. It's our evictions and tenant processes that we have. So not just for evictions, but what our tenant rights are and what our landlord rights are that we get questions on quite a bit. So would you like to introduce yourself, Donny?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, Lieutenant Waters. I'm glad to be here, and I'm excited to be able to share some of the information we have with the public out there in Paulding. So, well, as you said, I'm Donny Pace. I've been at the Sheriff's Office almost 21 years. I left for a few months and came back, and I left and figured out I needed to come back and work here in Paulding, where I live, where it really means a lot to me. So since I came back to the Sheriff's Office, I worked a couple different places, patrolled, went back to CID, and then Crimes Against Children. I've landed over here in the Warrants Civil Division and been here for probably close to 9-10 years now, where I've worked my way up through the ranks. Over in the division, we handle all kinds of stuff. We handle what we consider, on the warrant side of the things, that's pretty self-explanatory. We'll go out, we'll lock folks up that are that have broken the law, and as far as the search warrants, we go assist with that, and sometimes we'll assist other agencies where they come in and try to do that. And then on the civil side, that's where it gets into all the paperwork, a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, whether somebody's whether they're getting sued for a car wreck, they may be somebody filing for a divorce. It could be probate paperwork where somebody's passed, and we need to get the paperwork to them to help those processes along. And it goes along with that is our the eviction process, and we handle pretty much that process as far as on the Sheriff's Office side from beginning to end. So that's kind of what we do.
All right. Well, one of the things that's always interested me with the Sheriff's Office, and a lot of people aren't fully aware of what we do, and with us being a full-service Sheriff's Office, we handle everything at the Sheriff's Office. But when the Sheriff takes his oath of office, one of the first things he swears to do is to attempt all warrants, civil papers, writs of possessions, and so forth. So it's a very important thing that you do over there in the Warrants and Civil Division, because it's the thing that the state seems most necessary for us to swear on first.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
So I've always found that interesting. You hit something else that I like to talk about. You grew up in this community, and so did I, and you came back to work here, and you and I have got to spend almost our entire careers together, and it's been a lot of fun, and we've had a lot of fun doing this job together, serving some warrants.
Most definitely.
Yep. So, well, good. Well, let's get into the nitty gritty of this, and so what's the basic legal process? If somebody has a tenant that they want to get removed from their residence, what's the first thing that they should do?
So after they do certain things in their contract, they may have stipulations in their contract, what needs to happen to evict someone. Once they go through that, they may be required to give them a certain amount of notice before they're going to try to get them evicted or file for the paperwork. Yeah. So the landlord, their first part of that process, when they go to the courts, they would go to, you can actually go to several of the courts. Majority of people will actually go into, they started off at magistrate. So the majority of dispossessories, which is, that's the dispossessory is a legal term for what we call the evictions, right? So there are some terms that get mixed and matched a little bit back and forth, but so they would file for an application for dispossessory. That can go through, it can go through magistrate, it can go through state court, and they can also file it in Superior if they feel that it's necessary. So once they file that paperwork, it comes to the Sheriff's Office. where deputies will serve that. And the majority of the time that paperwork is served by tack and mail, which means it's pretty much we tack it to the residence, whether it's taped or however it's placed on that residence or that, and then we mail a copy, that same date. We'll mail that to the people that they're trying to get out of that house that they're trying to evict. So once that part happens, and it kind of the time frame on that really depends on if they answer or not. Once we serve them, it'll tell them they have 7 days from the date of service to answer that, unless it falls on a holiday or weekend, and then they'll go to the next regular business day when the courts are open. If they do answer, there's already as far as magistrate court goes, there is a preset court date. Sometimes in the other courts, they'll actually have to set a date. But for the majority of these do go through magistrate court, and they'll have a preset date. And then if they answer, they have the right to go to court, tell their side of the story on that day, where that the judge gets to hear them out and see if who's right, who's wrong, and who has to leave or who has to let them stay. So,
and the judge again can grant an extension at that point.
They can. There's different things. There's different ways that they can file different options for different courts to look at it. And that may be something we talk about later on, but they can file different petitions. Sometimes, as far as filing legal paperwork, I would always advise somebody if you're trying to file something through the courts, it's important to have an attorney so that you can file the paperwork in the proper order at the proper court, because if it's not filed right, you may not get the remedy that you're seeking on that thing. It may not go in your favor.
Well, people get upset with with us a lot of times for that when we come to their house and say if they're having a domestic issue and there's an argument and the husband or the wife may be the primary breadwinner and they want the other spouse removed, or even if it's just somebody that they've let move in and stay, but they have resident rights because they've let them stay the night and bring things in, so they've established rights to that residence, and we can't just remove them, so they have to go to the courthouse.
And some of that in recent times has actually changed from where we used to. So now, as far as the establishing residency in that at that location, the judges will actually look at, is there an actual agreement? Is there a payment agreement now, as opposed to before? Because now there's different remedies as far as squatters' rights, or trying to get them on squatters. So they will actually, if there's no official agreement, they may have them do what they call a civil ejectment, which is it's actually performed through a different process, similar to the squatters.
Right.
So once the dispossessory goes through, they go to court, or say they don't go to court. If they don't go to court, the landlord will automatically, for most circumstances, they'll actually be issued a writ of possession. That writ of possession is what the citizen would come. They would bring it to the sheriff's office with a fee. There's a statutory fee that's set by the state. It's $25 for an eviction. It's not really. It's just it's part of the process. It definitely probably doesn't pay for the time it takes to perform it, but they pay that fee. They bring us a copy of the writ, and they sign off knowing that they are familiar with what our requirements are at the sheriff's office. And from there, we schedule it. So we try to schedule all of them within a couple of weeks.
And that's hard because we get a tremendous amount of them too. We're going to talk about some numbers in a little bit, but we have a lot of evictions we have to do, unfortunately. And our portion of the eviction is not to evict the people; it's to be there for security. Correct.
Correct. So when the deputy would go out there, generally what they'll do is at first we try to make contact at the door. We knock and announce. That writ is ordering us to turn over that property to the rightful owner or their designee, whoever's out there on scene. So we would knock and announce. If nobody answers the door, then it's up to that landlord to give us access to that property. We don't, as the sheriff's office, we don't force entry on an eviction. They'll gain us access, whether by defeating the lock or however the property owner sees fit. And then once that happens, we pretty much try to make that area safe. Deputies will go in. They'll make sure that no one's hiding. They'll make sure that nobody is trying to hurt anybody else that they may contact, then we'll explain the situation. And just say we normally give them a little bit of time, say, hey, you got 15, 20 minutes, you need to grab your items up. We've got an order to turn this property over to them. You need to grab a few things and go. Sometimes the landlord will allow them to continue to remove their property while the crew is working.
Sure.
Because we normally there's a fairly large crew where we try to have these, resolved within a couple of hours so that we can do the next.
And 15 to 20 minutes doesn't sound like that much time, and it could sound kind of cold. However, let's talk about the time frames of the eviction process between the dispossessory that's initially filed to the actual writ of possession to the time frame they have to remove their items from the residence. Where does the time frame lie there?
So, and again, if the landlord gives some type of notice saying they're going to file it, that's some time. They file the dispossessory, which we know is normally 2 or 3 weeks until the court date happens, sometime within that time frame. And then after that, they obtain the writ, they schedule it with us, which is another couple of weeks. So they could be looking at, between when they tried to start the process and at this point, it may be, it could be a couple of months out.
Sure.
We also try just, for a couple of reasons. Number one, to streamline the process and to give the tenants notice. We'll actually post an orange sheet on their door and say, hey, within 7 days, 5 days, we're coming, to perform this eviction. And that kind of helps clear up a couple of different things. If there are any clerical errors on the side of those that own the property, or if, let's just say, they want to give them the opportunity to pay. Sometimes they'll pay, and the landlord will decide to let them continue staying there. So, but they have, plenty of notice on the process.
Except for in the case of things like an emergency eviction where there may be domestic violence or things involved with the protection order, or if the judge seems it fit to get them out quicker for any reason.
Yeah, and most of the time on those, say it's a temporary protective order where it is ordering them out of the residence. Again, it's temporary.
Right.
So with the eviction, it would be a more permanent thing. On the temporary order, unless the court decides after normally the initial hearing, they'll normally have a hearing set within a week or two for them on the most part, and they can tell their side of the story. Again, when we go out on those, whether if it's a temporary protective order, we give them the opportunity to take a few items, and then we'll make, if ordered and we work it out with the protected party, then we'll make arrangements. We'll go back and let them get some items later on, where it's reasonable amount of time for the sheriff's office and the protected party.
Because we want to be cooperative with people because they are humans at the end of the day, and we're dealing with people's lives. And that's why I wanted to bring that up about the time frame is, they've had adequate time to realize that they're unfortunately going to have to move. When my first residence was an apartment in Hiram, and part of my duties as a courtesy officer was to go around and drop notices off for the management to let the residents know that, hey, your rent's due. And it was their way of saying, hey, you're probably a pretty good tenant, but let's go ahead and get this paid up so we don't have to file these eviction notices. And there were a lot of times where I would go to the same door every month and not judging. Sometimes people get behind and it's hard, but it happens, and we understand that. And as law enforcement, it can be, evictions can be a very hard thing for us to have to think about doing because we don't want to put people's personal property out by a road.
I don't think anybody wants to have to do that. It is something that we are sworn to execute, all writs, all precepts, and those orders that come through the courts, we realize that as deputy sheriffs, we're sworn to do that.
Yes.
But we can do it as humanely as possible. So we go out there, and what I tell everybody, I know that it's a general rule for the sheriff's office, is we treat everybody just like they're our family.
That's right.
As long as we can, and until you have to step up to to that next level. So I'd rather be friendly with everybody we have contact with. I don't want to have to.
Absolutely. With my old friend that used to work with, you say treat everybody like your mom until it's time to treat them like your drunk uncle.
That's right.
So we do our best to treat everybody the same, and it is an unfortunate thing that does have to be done from time to time, but it's out of our hands because we don't file for the evictions. We're just simply doing what the court's is asking us to do. So let's say in the situation where somebody's refusing to leave, we've talked about that a little bit. Unfortunately, if they refuse to leave, they could go to jail. Is that correct? If they're refusing to leave the premises once the eviction's been served.
That's and the same aspect. So if they refuse to leave, we've got a court order to do it. We're gonna follow through with that court order. If they refuse to leave, they're subject to arrest and for several different things that we could. You know, it could be as easy as obstruction. We're ordered to get them out, and they could be obstructing us in our lawful duty.
Yeah.
If we put them out and they return to the property, then they could be, it could be criminal trespass.
Yeah.
We actually, once the evictions are completed by the sheriff's office, we'll post the court order. We'll post a notice saying if you return to the property, you do that. And that, just as when I say return to the property, I want to kind of give a clarifying point on that. It's not just they have the opportunity to come obtain their items, because when we do the eviction, kind of that process as I described earlier, we'll make it safe. The crew puts the property out, and they're supposed to put it out where they can access it from outside of the residence. Generally, it's in a driveway or somewhere close to the roadway where they can get it. By law, once the property is put out, it's actually abandoned property.
Yeah.
Maybe you may, neighbors could come than they have before and got the property. But as far as they have, we normally try to allow them 24 hours to come get it. Now, that's not state law.
Right.
But we, as the sheriff's office, we want them to try to get their property, as best we can. That's been a rule as long as I've been at the sheriff's office. We try to give them 24 hours.
Sure.
To get it. So, but yeah.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Well, good. So let's talk a little bit about numbers and the number of evictions that we're seeing. So what trends are we seeing right now with evictions in Paulding? And do you think they're increasing, decreasing? What are some numbers that you might could give us that we're doing as far as warrant services? And so tell us what your unit's doing.
Sure. So as far as the general numbers, I'll go back. I just pulled up some stats back to 2019 because I did want to show kind of a little bit how COVID affected a little bit of our evictions.
That's great.
Yeah. So back in 2019, we were running about a little bit over 300 evictions a year. So during 2020, we had 216. 21, we had 215. Well, then we started getting somewhat normal back in 22, where we had 364 evictions. Now, when I say we had that many evictions, let me tell you how many dispossessories were actually served that year. So out of 364 evictions, there was 3,626 dispossessories that went out. So, a lot of people are actually receiving the dispossessories, and through whatever reasons, the sheriff's office wasn't a part of performing that eviction.
Sure.
So you rock on into 23, we had almost 700 evictions that we did, 686 evictions.
Wow.
And then in 24, we had 706 evictions with 4,862 dispossessories that we served. So we're going from 300 in 2019, which would have been a kind of a normal year, up until, so we're over doubling that within a 5-year period. This year we're on track to potentially, hit 800, depending on if the numbers trend the way they're trending. We've already performed over 400 evictions this year.
So let's say somebody has a dispo or a dispossessory put out, and it's sent to the sheriff's office. We have to have 4,000. We have to have somebody tag and mail that. Each 4,000.
Yes.
So let's put that into perspective. So you have a unit of personnel, obviously. How many people do you have serving these dispossessories?
So generally we can actually make it happen with 2. So we have, and we've kind of had to alter our process a little bit with the notices and everything else. So we have 2 that are taking care of the dispossessories, because they actually have to be served, most of them within 1 week.
Yeah.
Once we get them, they have to go out. And the good thing about a dispossessory, that's unlike a normal civil paper, you don't actually have to physically hand it to a person.
Sure.
you can post it on the residence. So once those are received and we process them in our office, they're going to be served. But it does take time. There's those apartments. There's a lot of steps going up and down. You mentioned you worked there earlier, so there's it's a lot of labor involved in getting those out. Now we do have other deputies within the division that we will hand the work out to if we need to. Our orange notices, we kind of will divvy that out where it needs to be just to make it happen. The good thing about our division is we try to cross train our deputies so they can handle multiple facets of the job and take that.
And I guess one reason where you're seeing 4,000 dispos versus the 300 and some odd evictions, I guess people go ahead and move out, or they could potentially pay their rent and get to a point where they don't need to be evicted. And
correct.
Different reasons, I guess you could say. So it doesn't always mean just because you get a dispo that you're going to be evicted. But if you don't plan on paying your rent, you might want to go ahead and move.
Well, there's a lot of people, they just want to warn the people they're serious.
Sure.
They'll put it out there and say, hey, if you're not going to do what I asked, then I'm going to have you evicted. So,
and that kind of goes into our squatters' rights in Georgia, that we just finally passed laws, because that seems asinine to me that somebody would move into a residence and just get to stay, right? That doesn't seem, that to a logical citizen, that doesn't seem, and we try to live in logic, I do anyhow, but it doesn't seem logical that somebody can just move into a residence and stay without paying for it. And somebody owns that house and somebody pays for that house. Somebody works very hard every day to keep that house, whether it's a rental house or a vacant house. There's mortgages that have to be paid. If the house is paid off, taxes have to be paid. So for somebody to be able to move in, it's just wild in my mind that people think that they should just be able to move in and live for nothing. Nothing in life's for free. Everything costs something, whether it's, my labor costs something, everything costs something. Even if it's just your time, it costs. So it's just, that has been something on my mind that I just completely do not understand how people think that's okay. But then again, 23 years of being a law enforcement officer, a lot of things boggle my mind still.
And it makes us where we're not surprised anymore.
Absolutely.
I never knew everything that went on in Paulding before.
Not much surprises me anymore. Is it when I talk to people in public, can you believe this happened? And I just think, well.
Yes. I remember one of my first interactions with what I'll call like a squatter. So we went out, and over time our process has changed. Right, we know there's new laws in place that will kind of helps protect the landlord. They have people that have moved in. There's also been the old squatter law in place for years, which is and I'm gonna throw a code section out there, and it's, I'm hoping I'm halfway right with it. But it's around OCGA 4411 in that code section, probably around 30. It's actually talks about the intruder affidavits and things like that, where you can actually put people out. So it's an older law that's been in the books that we now can use that with the new law they put into place. But so we went out on this. I was helping out with some evictions, and we showed them. It had a for sale sign in the yard of the house. It was obviously looked like it was not occupied, or nobody was taking care of the yard. And so we showed up, and we go in and we did our process. They knocked on the door. Sheriff's office were coming in. Eviction sheriff's office were coming in. The crew let us in, and then as we open the door, we go in, and there's a glass of sweet tea just sitting there next to the back door. The back door standing wide open. So we go to look, and people are scooting across the field. They're running out there, jumping fences, and they hightailed it out of town just because they knew we were in there. Yeah. We were doing that. So those were obviously squatters. They obviously did not have a legal right to be in that house, and they realized they were about to get put out and possibly put in jail. So that's just one of the stories I think about when I do it. Well, now some of the squatters that we deal with are, and I'm gonna say they're squatters, and they don't know it. They've been somebody's taking advantage of the system. They go online and they have an online process for renting a house out. Well, they've been scammed.
You've seen that happen.
Yeah. So they try to get in there. They think they're doing the right thing.
And that's incredibly unfortunate, because somebody tricked that person in my neighborhood. A guy stopped to talk to us one day, and he says, "Hey," he said, I just have to ask, the house a few doors up is for rent. And they told me that it's only going to be, I think it was maybe $1,100 a month. And as you know, unfortunately, rent is astronomical in Paulding now. And for the square footage of this house, it would have been much more than that for rent. And he stopped me. He said, that just doesn't seem right. And I said, no, that's not right. And he had contact. He saw the house on Facebook Marketplace. They offered it to him for that. A person wanted to meet him there, signed papers, and they wanted him to go ahead and pay money forward. And they were just scamming him, and he was really going to get messed up on that. So, you know, and we've also seen it where mortgages will get sold out from underneath the renters, and they'll have to, the homeowner will have to have the renter move out quickly, even if they're up to date. And that's unfortunate. So you see some bad things and shady things sometimes on both ends. And speaking of squatters, not all of them are funny, where you see backsides and elbows running. You see, you know, sometimes they'll want to stand the ground and argue with you like a sovereign citizen does, because they want to use legal mumbo jumbo that doesn't even exist to try to confuse you, to make you think that they have the legal right to stay, even though the legal authority that came from the judge says they're to remove from the residence. They try, not always very successfully, but try to make themselves sound smart enough to stay in that residence, right?
And sometimes, unfortunately, they actually will draw that process out for months.
We've seen that happen recently, haven't we?
We have, on several occasions. So ultimately, in the end, the court process will work its way through, but unfortunately, it takes time for that. And we, you know, at times when paperwork is filed, you know, it's not up to us, so we have to have to go through that court. And talking about the squatters, the new process that well, there's actually a citation that can be issued by the deputies when they go on scene. It's for unlawful squatting.
Okay.
And with that, what happens is the citation is issued, and they pretty much have 3 days. They'll tell them there's 72 business hours to bring their documentation of their whatever their right is up to the sheriff's office and present it to me. So once they give it to me, then it will actually go through the process through magistrate court. Well, they will determine whether it's actually a valid lease or not. You know, they actually will set a court date, and by law, this is something that the Georgia legislation has done to speed up the process because it was taking so long, and it was hard for people to, you know, to rightfully get their property back. Dealing with that,
because it's frustrating. It's confusing to me, because logically thinking in my mind, if I come home from vacation, somebody's in my house. That's hard to stomach for me. Like, I hope that would never happen to me, right? Because I don't know how I would handle that, because you are the king of your own castle, right? That is your house. And for somebody to come in there and even just to use the restroom without my permission is going to be hard for me to deal with. But unfortunately, there's laws that...
And I mean, I would say if you come home and you're in that situation, at minimum, call law enforcement out.
Yes.
They can determine whether they think it's good enough for it to be, it could be criminal trespass.
Right.
If they feel that it's not, then they can do the unlawful squatting and let it work its way through the courts in a faster process.
Yeah.
And, you know, with the 4411 around the 30 code section, you know, if you were even to go into that under the old law, they still only have 72 hours to bring a counter affidavit back. So it's definitely a process for which we should be able to get those unlawful people out.
Absolutely. And I'm glad Georgia finally did that, because the issues with the squatters moving into vacant residences in neighborhoods, and there not being a real course of action for the owners of the residences that can get people in, especially if it's somebody that may own just a couple of rental houses, and that's a way of making extra income. So it really could hurt them in the long run. And if they have a possible good renter and they say, what kind of neighborhood is this? Somebody can just move into a house and it not be noticed, and maybe lose out on a good renter. And as you know, real estate's not easy. It's up and down. And so we saw that a lot with COVID, and COVID was a very interesting time in it. So,
COVID was a tough time. Well, for law enforcement in general, which we went through that together, but also, that moratoriums on the evictions. So
Right.
the landlords couldn't put them out,
Yes.
but the payments were still due.
So can you tell us about any social services or nonprofits that help families if they're under the eviction process, maybe to get caught up, or things that can, help within the community for folks?
So as far as directing people to an exact site, I'm not sure on the ones for getting help as far as for paying the payments and things like that. A lot of the ones that we actually deal with as a sheriff's office is for community things. We direct them to a couple of different places. So to obtain information on that eviction process, we send them to the Department of Community Affairs online, so they can get some information there as far as part of that process. Now, when we go out, if we see that there is a need, like say children in need, things like that, we can always reach out to DFACS, to some local ministries and things like that. And they also have for veterans, there's some nonprofits that will help a veteran that's been displaced by whatever means. So there are, without mentioning specific places, there are those in need. And then of course for the aging community, some may be out and they have. They may have be on the edge of dementia or something like that. I'm not a doctor, but they have some diminished mental capacity. Then we can actually reach out to Adult Protective Services and try to get some aid for them. We've done that in the past.
Yeah, and that's a great thing. Jeff and I were at a Jeff's our producer, by the way. He's over to my right. Hey, Jeff. So anyhow, Jeff and I were at a senior living facility earlier. Yeah. It's a very nice facility over in Hiram, and I was talking to the lady that manages it, and she works for a nonprofit type thing and I was asking her about it, and she was telling me that the facility will actually, whatever you bring in a month, they will kind of amend your rent to what you can afford to give you somewhere nice to stay. And it's a very good facility over in Hiram, and it's nice. I did not know that exists when she was telling me. I was like, this is great. And we got to go in and speak to them about fraud and scams that are going on. But she was telling me about how it works and things that were going on the first time that I met her, and it's extremely good, especially for our aging population. So if somebody, what advice would you give to someone if they may be facing eviction or falling behind on rent? What would you tell them to maybe try to reach out and do?
So I would advise for everybody just to know your rights, and this would be on the tenant or the landlord side. And one thing that one place that we can lead people to is Georgia has it's a Georgia tenant landlord handbook.
Okay.
And it's available. It's in a PDF version, and it's on the DCA's website. So you can just Google Georgia Tenant Landlord Handbook, and it'll take you right there. And it actually goes through different processes because, believe it or not, there's a different process for a mobile home than there is for a house. Sure. So it goes into different scenarios. What happens if I pay? Because that's one thing. And I will say, just because you pay doesn't mean the eviction isn't going to go through. But if you do pay, keep proof of your payment. And there are certain rules about other things too. And I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to go into the lawyerly type things on that. But just show proof of payment. If we come to perform an eviction and you've got proof of payment, that will at least let us see if the eviction is going to go through. Then, because it could still be proper, depending on the written order that we get from the judge. But we'll at least confirm that certain things have happened, and then we'll go from there. Because if it's not legal for us to do it and it's not right, then we're going to do what we can to make it right. So.
And one thing you mentioned was a government website and not getting your information off of YouTube or TikTok or whatever social media you like to follow or look at, because those. A lot of times people are wrong and just giving an opinion versus an actual fact-based backed by law. So if you go to those websites and get the things like the legal handbooks, it will help you understand what you need to actually do and be looking for, instead of just following by somebody that's going to get you in more trouble on YouTube. And not that everybody's wrong on there. There's a lot of folks that I follow and listen to that are lawyers, and I'll listen to things to strengthen myself in my career. And if they've passed a state bar, and then I'm going to listen to them because they're going to tell me how they're going to fight and win cases that I make, and they're not doing it. And that's why they're doing it. And that's what a lot of them say. They don't want us out making mistakes and getting into litigation we don't need to be in, because there's going to be plenty of that without them helping educate us. So.
And I would even say, take the information that you receive, verify it, but then also know your own courts, because each court system will handle the process differently. And just because Paulding is somewhat different than Cobb, but I'm sure there's a lot of similarities. So just definitely know your process, and whatever help we can provide as a sheriff's office, we will, and then we'll try to direct folks where they need to go if they're looking for something else.
Yep, absolutely. So what's something that you would like to say directly to our listeners about this topic?
So kind of going off of what we had talked about earlier, it's this putting somebody out of their residence. It's not something that we necessarily want to do as people, and it's not something we want to do, but it's something that we're sworn to do, and it's part of our lawful duties to enforce the orders of the court. And when we look at that, it's not just we're putting somebody out. We're also helping somebody get that residence back in a lawful way that the court has ordered. I would just, if everybody would just, treat us the way we want to treat them, and we'll make the process go as smooth as we can. It's not pleasant for anybody, but it's something that has to happen. And then if we determine that it's something that doesn't need to go through, and if it's something that needs to be reviewed, then we'll step from there. We can always press the pause button if it's lawful to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. So we spoke briefly on it about resources, websites, phone numbers, and things like that, but who would you recommend people call if they have questions or want to learn more about the eviction process, whether it be the handbook that we talked about, or
as far as calling, if they need to, if they're going to file something in Paulding County, they're always welcome to call our office. The Warrants Civil Division, our phone number is 770-443-3049. We also have most of our information available online on the website. So if they'll go to the Paulding Sheriff's website.
And that's under paulding.gov?
It is.
Yep.
Paulding Sheriff, yeah.
So under the warrants, and those are important things to know, because something that a lot of people don't understand is a lot of times in law enforcement, although we have the same job, if you call somebody out to your residence, we don't always complete the same tasks every day, right?
Correct.
If a patrolman's called out and you want to do a pick up belongings, they may only have just a few minutes for something they should be setting up through you guys to take more time to do. And also, if they don't specialize in the civil process, they might have to find that information out through someone else. So,
and with the pickup belongings, I just want to stress also on that. That's something that now the sheriff's office, unless it's an emergency situation,
right,
we're not going to get involved without a court order.
No.
So if there's now a temporary protective order, sometimes they will stipulate what happens with property, divorce proceedings, something like that. But it's something that our main job in that is to keep the peace.
Yes.
And we can't decide what property belongs to who. So sometimes that has to be decided by the courts.
Yep. And not to get too far off track, but with the civil side of it, same thing with repossessories. Our job when we show up is to keep the peace. And
That's correct. Yep.
A lot of times the drivers or the people involved may not like the outcome because they make their living by repossessing vehicles. And if there's been a breach of the peace, that vehicle has to be dropped if it's still within the property, and they don't like that. But it's what we can only enforce what the laws say we can, and help with what is in that parameter and keep peace. So what can our community do better to support people on both sides of the eviction issue, tenants and landlords? What do you think that we could do as a community?
So as a community, I would just say, hey, support your neighbor in that. Know your neighbor, know if they've got trouble. Maybe when it gets to the eviction side of it, it's a little bit too late. But if you know beforehand, know if the family needs some help. If you're a part of whatever, a good church, or you have a good unit of neighbors that can get together and help take care of people, because it's not always because people are bad people because they can't pay their bills. Sometimes they've been handed a bad situation.
Sure,
and they just can't get out of it. So I think we as a community can come together and help those that we can, and because once it gets to the point of them that order being issued, it may be a little too late to help on some of that. We can maybe make the move a little bit easier, but
absolutely,
they may have to move. So
that's why it's important to be part of your community. That's that's a lot of what I do at the sheriff's office, is being over community relations and the public affairs, is that we try to really know the community and the needs, and that's why we started doing these podcasts and talks, or so that the public can be educated on their needs and things that we think that they would find relevant because of issues that we see in our general day-to-day jobs. Because these are all issues that come up, and for us they come up a lot of questions come up about civil process and evictions, because people really don't understand it, and a lot of times, like I said, I think logically, and sometimes it's hard to think somebody could just move into a house and expect not to pay, but they do. Just like when people say that they're traveling down the road and they're not driving. You're just a travel. Well, we've seen the videos and we don't like dealing with it, and but people try to use confusion and anger to get out of certain situations, and that's incredibly unfortunate. But community is a big part of what we do, and that's why we do try to educate and let people know not necessarily the rights from wrongs, but what they can and can't do, and help them. So, well, this has been great, Donny.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I love always talking to you. You've been a good friend of mine for many, many years.
Long time.
We watched each other grow, and
yes, sir.
It's great to get to do this kind of thing with you, and I hope our community enjoyed it. And just two old friends talking about some things that hopefully can help them.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you,
down the road.
I appreciate you having me.
All right. Thank you, Donny. Until we see you next time, we hope everybody has a great day. And if you need anything, please call us at the Paulding County Sheriff's Office. Thank you.